Welcome you all to the Queensland AI Hub webinar this afternoon, introducing Dr. Sue Keay, our wonderful CEO. So to start with, I would like to respectfully acknowledge the traditional owners and custodians of the land and or sea on which we meet today. I also acknowledge that we have a number of parties joining us by virtual means today and from other regions of Queensland and around Australia. And I'd like to acknowledge the traditional owners and custodians of those regions and pay my respects to elders, past, present and emerging. So today we're here to learn about Dr. Keay, our esteemed CEO. And what we're going to look at today is the journey that's brought her to be our CEO at the Queensland AI Hub. So it's more a retrospective look about what are the skills and attributes and journey that she's been on that's allowed her to put herself in the position to be selected as our CEO. So to introduce Sue, I'll just give you a bit of a brief outline, and trust me, this is a brief bio of her history. So Dr. Keay comes to the Hub from the role of Research Director for Cyber Physical Systems at CSIRO's Data 61. Among many achievements, she has been responsible for setting up the world's first robotic vision research centre and led the development of Australia's first robotics roadmap, outlining how robotics and automation will impact on every sector of the Australian economy. Dr. Keay was formerly the Chief Operating Officer for the Australian Centre for Robotic Vision and has an MBA from the University of Queensland Business School. She's a graduate of the Australian Institute of Company Directors and chairs the boards of Robotics Australia Group and serves on boards of the CRC for optimising resource extraction and women in robotics. Dr. Keay completed her PhD in Earth Sciences at the Australian National University and recognised as a superstar of STEM and one of Queensland's most influential people. So we're very, very excited to have Sue on board as our CEO, and I'd like to hand it over to Sue right now. Now, before I actually do that, we do have a chat function, so please do ask some questions, and there'll be time for questions at the end, and we'll try and get to as many of those as we can. And I hope you enjoy Sue's presentation. So thanks, Sue.
Thanks, Rowan, and thank you everyone for giving up your Thursday afternoon to, I guess, find out more about what is happening at the Queensland AI Hub. I'm certainly aware that there is a lot of interest in the Queensland AI Hub and what we are going to be doing next. And given that it is day 4 for me, there is not a huge amount to share from the last 4 days. So that's why I thought I will take you on a little bit of a journey of what has led me to joining the Queensland AI Hub and just a bit of a preview of where we're hoping to go. But I think one of the main things that I am hoping to do in this in my early days in the role is actually to be going out and talking to many of you in the AI community. So I guess I really want to cover off on what's happening now, a bit about who I am. You know, some of background information on some of the projects and things that have led me to here. And I guess then just posing, you know, a couple of ideas out there around, you know, why artificial intelligence and why Queensland and why now? Why do we have a Queensland AI Hub and what might we be able to do with it? So in terms of what is happening, this is week 1 for me. So it has involved moving in. It's we have a beautiful space in the precinct, but it's completely empty. We were able to borrow some tables and chairs, but apart from that, it's bring your own everything. And as I mentioned, my priority in the first weeks of being CEO is really around engaging with the AI community and listening to what you have to say. So many of you will be aware that the process towards bringing the Queensland AI Hub on board has been quite a long one, involving 2 different tenders from the Queensland Government. The Queensland Government has funded us to fulfil some specific purposes, and those are listed here. These are the objectives on which we were funded. But within those, I think there's a lot of room for us to really shape the direction that we want to take the hub. And that's really what I would appreciate hearing from you all about what you think that might look like. And then we can work out whether that is something that we can make happen. But the 5 objectives that the Queensland Government have funded the Queensland AI Hub for are around growing awareness and connecting users with local AI talent and technologies, showcasing our local AI talent and businesses. And you will have noticed that before I've even come on board, there have been people busily working behind the scenes, interviewing and collecting stories about some of the artificial intelligence successes that have happened within Queensland. One of the purposes of the Queensland AI Hub is also around delivering programs to help us develop AI talent, because that is just something we can't get enough of. And it's also about connecting Queensland's AI talent and solutions to other global centres. And I mean, ultimately, it's around building the Queensland AI community. Now, the Queensland AI community is remarkable, I believe, compared to many other parts of the world and certainly in Australia, in actually self-organising and starting to create their own community in the form of the Queensland AI Meetup Group. And I think that what the Queensland AI Hub is really about harnessing that energy and working out how we can turn that into greater things. So you might have noticed, one of the objectives is about essentially making Queensland into an AI destination. And so you might have noticed that there's been a change to the look and feel of the Queensland AI Hub. So we really wanted to have, as part of our brand identity, AI clearly in the, the centre of Queensland as part of our identity, so that people see it as part of our DNA and not something to be frightened of. And certainly something that is applicable across all of Queensland, not just in the southeast corner. So you'll be getting used to seeing that symbol in a lot of different areas. Now, in terms of a bit of background about me, and I don't have time to go through a year by year kind of journey, but you can see there from when I was quite young, I came from a reasonably adventurous family. I was very fortunate to grow up in a family of what we would now describe as early adopters. I well remember being the first home in our street to have a home computer. I remember our neighbours actually being invited over and coming over to have a look at this, marvellous invention. And I guess, that was where I really was very privileged compared to many other people, in that I always had access to many of the latest technologies, and also was able to get very early experiences of different parts of the world. And I'm not sure, I like this photo. I do believe that health and safety is important, but sometimes I think it's also important to be adventurous, which appears to be what I'm doing in that picture. And I'm not sure whether this picture had a lot of influence, but one of my earliest careers was actually as a geologist, as Rowan previewed. And I have had what I like to describe as a very non-linear career path, which I hope actually gives many people some hope for the future. I mean, we often talk about people having portfolio careers nowadays. I don't think it's very common that people have a linear career path anymore, and certainly that has been true in my case. So while I originally started off as I started off doing a whole range of different things before I settled on what type of course I wanted to do at university. And then I settled on earth sciences and really stuck with it. I was quite committed to having a career as an earth science researcher. I really loved that work. But things change, and I moved out of being a research scientist doing work in the lab, and I moved more into communication, had children along the way, then moved more into business development, mainly staying in the area of the application of research to industry. And that led me into working in commercialisation. So I worked with UniQuest, commercialising some of the social sciences research, which is a very interesting area, not so commonly done, very different to how you commercialise other types of intellectual property. I then, took a turn into a centre of excellence that focused on water recycling before finding my way to the Australian Centre for Robotic Vision when it was first being set up by Peter Cork, based at QUT, but it is a national research centre funded by the Australian government. And that was, I guess, my introduction more into the world of technology. The Australian Centre for Robotic Vision was set up to bring the fields of robotics and computer vision together, and that really was my first introduction to artificial intelligence. And what a great time to be at that centre, because when that centre started, people had really only were not applying deep learning at all. And as the centre was starting in 2014, it was when people had realised the potential applications of deep learning, and then it was just on for young and old. So it was a very exciting time to be part of the centre and seeing how a lot of that was being developed and being applied in different areas where, you know, that work had never really touched before. Most recently, I have been Research Director for Cyber Physical Systems with CSIRO's Data 61, which again was just a smorgasbord of interesting stuff involving not just robotics and computer vision, but the development of sensing systems, cybernetics, where, you know, you're also bringing in biological components as well as the physical and digital, and that was a huge amount of fun. But then the opportunity with Queensland AI Hub came up, and I thought this really is a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity to do something that I believe is really important, and that is bringing the AI community together in Australia and encouraging all of Australia to really reap the benefits of technology and not be left behind the rest of the world. Because I think we have so many opportunities, and, you know, I always feel sad whenever we lose a company or some of our people to somewhere overseas. It's great when they can get experience overseas, but we really need to find a way that we have an environment where people really aspire to come back to Australia and make a difference from here and build up export markets from here and jobs and opportunities. So I guess, as I mentioned, you know, I've started off as a research scientist. You know, I got to travel to various places around the world. That's Krakatoa up the top, having a look at that volcano, working in labs. I then moved more into applied research, where I was working in the area of material science, specifically the development of new light metal alloys. With a cooperative research centre, I've maintained quite a great connection with cooperative research centres. To me, I found them very appealing in that, you know, their core business is really trying to do something that we all know is very difficult in Australia, and that is taking university research and making sure that it is actually applied and used by industry. Not always easy, but I think it's a very important ambition that we can't let go of. And then, as I described, you know, most recently, I've been with the Australian Centre for Robotic Vision, which was really my first introduction to robotics and artificial intelligence, and then with CSIRO's Data 61 with their cyber physical systems research program, which was just really fun. And another big influence, I guess, in where I've ended up today has been my older sister, Andra, who you'll see pictured in that photo. I'm the little blonde one. She's my big sister. And she is the managing director of Silicon Valley Robotics over in the States. And it was her that suggested to me, well, actually suggested to me for quite some time, that robotics was the way of the future and I really should get on board. But because she's my older sister, I didn't listen to her for several years. Until that opportunity came up to work with Peter Cork at the Australian Centre for Robotic Vision. And then once I had gotten on board, I realised it really was the place that I wanted to be. And, you know, my sister's done a lot of initiatives in terms of building the robotics community over in Silicon Valley. And it's a really interesting model. It was a group of very successful robotics companies in Silicon Valley who have invested in helping new up-and-coming robotics companies become successful. So they formed Silicon Valley Robotics, and as I mentioned, my sister's the managing director of that. And you know, I find her a really fantastic sounding board to be able to, you know, really think about what it is that we need to change in Australia to make Australia an attractive destination, so that not only does a lot of our talent and our technologies remain in Australia, but that we can also encourage people to come here as well, or for our expats to return to Australia. you know, one of the challenges that we face is that when a company does decide that they will seek investment overseas, it's like the Australian government completely cuts them off. It's like they're not Australian anymore. And I guess in many senses they're not, because they've formed companies overseas. But I think that that loses the opportunity for us to maintain a connection and to try and encourage those companies and to have offices back here in Australia, and even potentially to move back here. So yeah, watch this space. I think that this is an area that, particularly in the wake of COVID, we have a lot of opportunities to be encouraging expat Aussies to rethink where their businesses are located, and to encourage them to come back here to Queensland. Now, my sister has also been a big inspiration, and she started the International Women in Robotics movement, of which I'm part of the board. And you know, I guess you can't be in artificial intelligence without appreciating that there really is quite a gap in terms of gender. And so one of the projects that I have done in the past, I call it a passion project, was to bring the Grace Hopper celebration to Australia last year. And so back in July 2019, it finally happened. It was called Hopper Down Under. And it was a way that we could showcase, and more than 700 women from across the world attended the conference. But it was a way that we could showcase a lot of the female talent that is already here in Australia. And what I would like to see in the future, Anita B. Org is committed to having more of these events in the Asia Pacific region. What I'd like to see in the future, and this happened to a small extent with this first conference, but I think we can do a lot better, is it is an opportunity for companies to recruit for diversity. And that's certainly how the Grace Hopper celebration works in the US, although obviously everything has had to go virtual at the moment. But it really is a way that if you're a company that is committed to diversity, you can actually go to one place and see a lot of talent on display, and actually work at recruiting the talent that you need and the diversity that you need at an event like this. I guess one of the other things that has you know, been a project that has led me onto this path to joining the Queensland AI Hub was developing Australia's first robotics roadmap. So when I was working with the Australian Centre for Robotic Vision, one of the purposes of the centre was to actually show leadership in the space of robotics and computer vision. And so when I looked around at other parts of the world, I realised that many other countries have these things called robotics roadmaps, but Australia did not. And in speaking to people within the robotics community, it became clear that many people had thought of doing a roadmap at various points, but for different reasons that just hadn't happened. So fortunately, with the backing of the centre, and particularly with QUT providing quite you know, some funds to put it together, and building on the goodwill of the robotics community in Australia, we started a whole series of workshops across the country, having a look at how robotics can impact all sectors of the Australian economy, but importantly, also trying to map out what capability is here in Australia in this space. And that was not easy to find. And we face exactly the same problem for the broader AI community. One of the reasons that mapping out our capability is crucial is because whenever you go and talk to a politician, you'll know that a lot of their interest is around, you know, how your sector can help to generate growth in jobs and also economic productivity. And unless you can actually describe the size of your industry, how much they're exporting, what value they give to the Australian economy, it's really hard to put forward any sort of arguments that there should be initiatives in the space that the government is supporting if you can't really define what your capability is. And this is an important process. The robotics roadmap, the first version, really only just touched the surface. One of the big issues that we have, and I think it's even more pronounced with the broader artificial intelligence community, is that obviously many companies don't conveniently just call themselves robotics companies. As you know, there are many companies involved with artificial intelligence who it's not their core business, it's not part of their company name. It might just be one dedicated team that is doing artificial intelligence, but that is still an important capability that we really would like to get a handle on. So one of the other first tasks for my role is really about trying to get a better understanding of the capability we have in artificial intelligence in Queensland. The way that we went about that for robotics nationally was to really do a search through company databases, looking for particular keywords that would be associated with either robotics companies or companies that develop robotics related technologies such as vision systems or sensors. And all the red dots on that map of Australia there were individual companies that we were able to identify through this process. And although, the process wasn't, I'm sure that we actually are just scratching the surface and that there probably is much more capability than we were able to determine during this process. What we found was that conservatively, we believe that in Australia, there are more than 1,000 companies in the robotics industry in Australia, that they're employing more than 50,000 people, and that it is worth more than $12 billion in revenue to the Australian economy. Now, robotics is just a subset of our artificial intelligence community. So I think that you can multiply those figures by, maybe 5, perhaps even more for artificial intelligence. But until we actually go and map our capability and start to tell the stories of what we are doing in artificial intelligence in Queensland, then we're really operating off the basis of not very much data at all. And I guess this brings me to why artificial intelligence and why is it important now? And, one of the things when I, first, I guess, moved into the robotics field that struck me was that the pace of technological change is so rapid. How can we best prepare everyone for these changes? And what really concerned me, particularly if you've operated in the robotics space, you'll know that there's been quite a period of time where if you're developing talented people in that space, they were all just being hoovered up by the self-driving car industry and taken overseas. And it really concerned me about, how is Australia going to take advantage of a lot of these emerging technologies if we are going to have this constant struggle to provide opportunities for our talent here in Australia, and also to upskill our companies to be able to take on board the technologies that we're developing. And I think that this slide is really true. Australia's opportunities in artificial intelligence are time limited. We can take our time about adopting technologies, and unfortunately all that means is that we won't see the same economic benefits that other countries see who are looking at adopting far more rapidly. And so I guess that really is my driver, because I believe this is crucial to Australia's future, crucial to our children's future, for us to have a sustainable economy, for us to be able to maintain our living standards, for us to be able to solve a lot of the challenges that previously we haven't been able to solve without tools that are currently being developed using artificial intelligence. Australia really does risk being left behind. And if there's anything that I can do to prevent that from happening, I'm all on board. And that's where I see the Queensland AI Hub as an opportunity to help make sure that Australia is not left behind. We can probably have quite a debate over different people's interpretations of artificial intelligence. And I'm just putting this up here to emphasize that I have a robotics background, but, I see robotics as an important subset of the artificial intelligence community. And I think we do have a bit of a communication issue where sometimes people think that artificial intelligence and machine learning are interchangeable terms and don't really take account of all of the other aspects of artificial intelligence that are out there and also form important parts of our community. So I believe that, we need to consider all aspects of the artificial intelligence community. And I think we're stronger as a result of that if we're all able to work together. Because the aims that I think, all of these different groups within artificial intelligence are trying to achieve are the same. It's about making sure that Australians have industry 4 relevant skills, that we're able to weather the transformation that is going to be facing us in the future, and that we're actually at the forefront of developing the technologies that our industries use, that we're not just importing these technologies. And I think that really is the key for us developing a sustainable artificial intelligence ecosystem. If we can find a way that there are plenty of opportunities for our talent and technologies, then it will also encourage more venture capital investment, which has clearly been an issue here operating in Australia for many of our companies. But if we can get the right ecosystem happening, then a lot of those things will come together. We'll find opportunities and it will encourage investment. And so why Queensland as opposed to anywhere else? And I guess I was quite unaware of this until probably doing the robotics roadmap, when I sat down and I actually started having a look at where a lot of the capability resides in different parts of Australia. Arguably, Queensland has, not only is probably punching above its weight in terms of the number of artificial intelligence companies that it generates, but it has also been fortunate to benefit from a couple of historical circumstances that has meant that our local education and university systems are quite strong in a lot of the feeder subject areas for artificial intelligence and for robotics. So the Queensland government made an investment more than 20 years ago into the Queensland Centre for Advanced Technologies, which has meant that was where CSIRO based most of their robotics and cyber physical systems research, and that has had a lot of flow-on effects. So we have, been the home for the Australian Centre for Robotic Vision. We have a strong data science group here in Queensland. All of these ingredients, if you have a look at how successful technology clusters have developed in other parts of the world, are really critical ingredients. We have the fastest growth in startups. We have a stable and progressive political climate that is supporting a lot of entrepreneurship. Many people are not aware that Brisbane and Queensland more broadly actually produces 60% of the world's mining software, which is quite a capability in tech in itself. We have arguably Australia's greatest capability in cyber physical systems, and I'm sure if I was to go through and have a look in natural language processing and some other areas, we'll probably find that we're pretty good on some key metrics as well. But if anyone has some data on that they can share with me, that'd be great. Otherwise, that's something that I'm going to be trying to hunt down. But yes, we're very fortunate in having a strong research and education base. And the other reason that it's important for Queensland is that as part of my role with the Australian Centre for Robotic Vision, I commissioned a report that actually looked at the economic benefits of the adoption of robotics and automation for Queensland. And so I think that a lot of the benefits that are articulated here can be articulated more broadly for artificial intelligence in general. And essentially what that report found was that if we are able to support Queenslanders to adopt at least robotics and automation, but I'm sure this is also true for artificial intelligence, we just haven't done the economic analysis of that, then it would be over the next 10 years worth 725,000 jobs, and it would contribute $77.2 billion to our gross state product. So those are significant benefits, and those are also conservative benefits. But the frightening thing about this study was that it showed that the same benefits would not accrue if we delayed in implementing these new technologies. And sorry, that's what's reflected in this. So as I said, this was quite a conservative estimate of the benefits of just adding 1.5% per annum growth to the Queensland economy. However, if we delayed, then all of those benefits disappeared. And I guess the other interesting thing that I think is something the Queensland AI Hub will need to address is around the importance of SMEs in Queensland. Now, Australia is an SME nation. We are a country dominated by small to medium-sized enterprises, but that is nowhere more true than in a state like Queensland, where I believe 90% of our population is employed by companies who have 20 people or less. Now, I think there are a lot of strengths in having so many SMEs, but one of the weaknesses is that it is difficult for companies with 20 or less people to really invest a lot in their innovation capacity. And so I think something that will be critical is working with the Queensland government to find ways that we can make sure that our SMEs are not left behind in the adoption of emerging technologies. And that's certainly an area that I'm very keen to explore. So again, something that I'm hopeful that I'll be able to talk with many of you about is what will working with the Queensland AI Hub look like? What are the opportunities to partner with the Queensland AI Hub? And this is really just a list of suggestions. Some of them we might find will make sense and some of them may not make sense, but this is the sort of conversation that I would like to pursue with many of you to work out what it is that Queensland AI Hub can do to either help make your business more successful or to help your business to adapt to the emerging technologies that are coming out, and preferably how we can put those two things together, the development of our new technologies and the application of them. So there's listed there are a number of opportunities. The Transformer Lab that we're hoping to set up in the space that we have at the precinct will be an opportunity for members of the different Queensland government departments to form teams to actually tackle a lot of the challenges that they're facing in Queensland government, where we'll pair them up with experts in residence, so people from local AI companies who have some expertise who might be able to help develop solutions to the many challenges facing our government at the moment. And obviously we're already starting to do a lot of events. We're already starting to promote much of the AI activity that's happening in Queensland. And I welcome your suggestions on other areas that you think that it makes sense for the Queensland AI Hub to have a role. So in terms of our vision, it is to really, as shown in this image, really shine a spotlight on Queensland and to see Queensland recognised both nationally and internationally as a leader in AI-enabled positive transformation. To do that, we're going to need to harness talent across all of the regions of Queensland. Another one of my first roles will be to reach out to many of the regional innovation hubs to discuss how we can be working in with them. We clearly need to be working in with all of our university, industry and government sectors so that we can find the best ways that we can develop people's talents and skills, and also importantly to encourage investment and global competitiveness. As part of that, we want to be encouraging diversity and inclusion so that everybody can come along on this journey of, and the excitement of being able to be part of the artificial intelligence community, and to encourage innovation and capability development and collaboration across all sectors so that AI actually is, just seen more as a tool and not as some, scary new technology that people are frightened of. And, I'm not sure that I really have quite developed, an aspiration for the Queensland AI Hub as yet. So I'm leaning on one that I had thought of, when I was more strongly involved in robotics. So obviously we want Queensland AI to be recognised internationally, but, I think that something else that we really need to aim for as a country is to be proud of our achievements in artificial intelligence. And, I'm taking a leaf out of Canada's book here. Canada is super proud of the work that they've done on the Canadarm that has been deployed with the International Space Station. I would love to see in the future that we actually have some Australian technology on our Australian currency that everyone can be equally proud of here in this country. So that is my presentation. I encourage you to, yes, please get in touch and stay connected with us as, we're finding our feet and working out the best ways forward. And I'd love to hear people's questions. Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you, Sue. That was fantastic and always great to look back on the journey that's got you here. So we do have a couple of questions, and you I think you did touch a little bit on the first one, which is, you know, how government can work with the AI Hub to leverage change and support your vision. So, I mean, you did cover off on that, but is there any other comments that you'd like to make on that?
Around the vision?
No, about how government can work with the hub.
Oh, sorry. I was busy reading the questions in the chat. So how government can work with, well, actually yesterday, Kelvin Ross, who is the chair of the Queensland AI Hub board, and I were involved in a community of practice that the Queensland government holds around emerging technologies. And I think there are huge opportunities. It's really interesting to see many of the government departments in Queensland are experimenting with different emerging technologies. Top of the list are things like machine learning. And so I think there are huge opportunities. One thing that I think that we can really harness, though, is the opportunity to do things across the different agencies. So the whole idea of the Transformer Lab is that we encourage, you know, government to put teams of people together to solve some of the challenges that they have using artificial intelligence, and put them into a space for a couple of months where they can interact with our experts in residence to really develop some solutions that can be used not just in one agency but across other agencies. Queensland Government obviously is a very important employer and also contractor of services in our economy, so it's vital that we work together. And of course, the Queensland Government wouldn't have invested in the Queensland AI Hub if they didn't have an intention to work in with us.
Excellent, thank you. Yeah, no, that's great. And look, I guess the whole point of this is to you know, provide the introduction to the community of you as our CEO, and you know, we'd love to continue these conversations offline with those people that are, you know, have interest in different areas. Now, I do have another, well, it's about 14 questions in one, so thank you, Kate, for your question. But look, it says, Sue, it says, AI is quite expensive with potential damaging consequences such as reinforcing power structures, corporate and government, and concentrating economic wealth that can disempower the most marginalised. AI production can be bad for environment, e.g. massive power consumption, and offers problematic employment, e.g. encourages casualised work doing classification of training of algorithms. So there's a couple of questions here, but what is your philosophy on how AI projects should be prioritised in Queensland? That's the first one. Do you have a view on how AI should be conceived of as a net benefit to society? And how will AI bring more jobs to Queensland? So there's a few.
Yeah, no, thanks, Kate. You know, obviously there's a lot of sensitivities around some of these new technologies, and with artificial intelligence and the, you know, potential for, I don't like to think of it as job losses, more as job transformation if it's handled correctly. I think that there's a really strong role that government policy plays in all of this. So I think on the one hand, we need to be upskilling our companies to be able to adapt to these new technologies, or they're not going to be competitive, and that's going to have unfortunate consequences for our economy and will lead to job loss, regardless of whether they apply artificial intelligence or not. But in terms of that, I think what's important is that we can actually put some limits in place. So one example is that in Singapore, they were encouraging uptake of technology, but as part of being able to access a particular government grant program, you also had to guarantee that you were not going to reduce your staff numbers. So I think that where you can find ways to essentially mandate that a lot of the application of these technologies will not cause job loss, then I think that that will go a long way towards easing people's concerns about the adoption of these technologies. I think that maybe the jury's a bit out with artificial intelligence more generally, but certainly specifically for robotics, we actually know that the opposite narrative is true. That while people think that robots take jobs, in reality, the economic evidence is that robots actually are creating jobs. The only thing is that those jobs might be different to the jobs of the past. But one big benefit of adopting a lot of these technologies is in allowing companies to remain economically competitive, so that in many cases they can be more profitable and by virtue of that, employ more people. But those are stories that I don't think are actually being told enough. And I do agree, Kate, that there, is the potential for all of these technologies to be misused. And I think that's where we really have to be quite careful about the government policies that we introduce, because I think that all of society has to benefit from the adoption of these technologies for people to accept those technologies. And so we need to put in place mechanisms that can happen. I guess ideally we should only be developing some of these technologies if it can be demonstrated that they are actually tools for augmenting human potential rather than for replacing people. The only real need for replacing people is in areas where they're working in dangerous situations. And so I think during the COVID crisis, we've seen that in areas such as, for example, hospital cleaning. It's much more effective if you can actually send something like a robot in to be able to do UV disinfectant of surfaces rather than placing a human at risk by asking them to do that job. So I don't know, it's complex, Kate, and I'm not sure I have a perfect answer. I think that we will struggle as we go through this process to figure out our best way forward. But the most important thing is to do exactly as you're doing and question and ask and, I guess demand that these technologies be not only created, but introduced in a way that is socially acceptable.
Thanks, Sue. Yeah, and I think it's a great point. And the reality is every iteration of technology has created a change in the types of jobs we do. So, and this technology is going to be no different. So just another question here, Sue, and look, to everyone that's asked questions, if we don't get to them all, we will respond to them by email, or there's some people reaching out for contact. We will do that. So if we don't get to everyone, please accept our apology, but we will follow up with you. So got a question here, Sue, that from Marty. He's a researcher working in the field of optimization using computational intelligence algorithms to solve dynamic multi-objective optimization problems. I need a degree just to say that sentence. What possibilities are there for me to work with the hub? So I guess the question is, and it's probably not specific to that, but where do you see potentially, and obviously we have a lot of work to do to set things up in the future, but maybe you could talk to the point on a little bit about where we're looking to, engage with the community and bring them in to provide opportunities like that.
Yeah, well, the Queensland AI Hub is set up to be a connector. So, Marty, I'd encourage you to, I guess we'll take down a copy of these questions so that we can get in touch later. But, I guess it depends a bit on what sort of work it is that you want to do. I mean, one of the, another key objective of the hub will be around how we can make sure researchers are getting access to data sets that they need. And if we can do that in conjunction with some of our either government or industry partners to allow research to occur, then, that's a win-win for everybody. So, perhaps we need a bit more details about where it is that you're looking to apply that research. And then if we can find a way that makes sense that we can connect you in with the people that can give you access to what you need for your research, then that's clearly a role that the AI Hub should be playing.
Excellent. And look, the next one probably flows on a little bit from that, Sue. It's from Shahzad, and she asked, in your roadmap, do you have any plan or specific, any plan specific for closing the gap between AI-based research at universities and their transfer to industry? So you've just touched on that a little bit, but maybe that connectivity is something we can talk to a little further.
Yeah, definitely. And, it is a well-known challenge in Australia, and people have different answers to the question. Is it a matter of actually investing more in the actual transformation process, where you're actually taking it out of the universities and putting it into industry? We always seem to fall in a real gap. And so it's often very difficult to take things up the technology readiness levels to the point where they can be successfully adopted by industry. And the other problem is often timing. I know from my experience working in different research organizations that sometimes technology that we try and partner with industry to develop, it's ended up just actually being a bit too early, and people weren't ready to take it on. So that's a really multifaceted problem. And yeah, I mean, I think certainly it's something that we need to keep exploring, because it does nobody any good to have that as an unsolved issue. But I do think that perhaps investment is quite a key. We know that Australia is very poor in terms of attracting venture capital investment, and that could be a key driver to help us move some of our research out of our research organisations and push it into industry.
Excellent. And, you know, obviously part of, you know, trying to engage industry and those sorts of things is really important to us to drive these sorts of conversations. And I've got a question from one of our wonderful presenters on our recent Straight Out of Queensland webinar series, Andrew Robinson out of Cairns. And they're a world leader in collective superintelligence. So if you haven't seen that webinar, jump on our website. The recording's there, and you can have a listen to what Andrew's doing up there. But, you know, he's asking what is built here in Queensland. So he's asking, how can we be heard? You know, it often feels like unless CSIRO or another existing institution recognises our tech, which is not in their interests and costs us time, money to educate them, we're not taken seriously. What's your recommendation?
I guess I probably need to understand who is not taking you seriously to fully answer that question. Because, you know, curiously, when I worked at CSIRO, one of the big issues that they had was that they didn't feel that their research results were recognised externally. So, you know, I think that is a role of the Queensland AI Hub, to be telling stories like yours and to be promoting them. And, you know, I think one of the other questions that has come up here is from Trade Investment Queensland. So I think linking into those networks where there are people who are actively keen to find out what technologies exist here and how they can bring in investment and get word of those technologies out so that they can be exported. I mean, there are people who, you know, that is actually their role to try and help companies like yours to get recognised internationally. And certainly, I think the Queensland AI Hub also plays a role in that as well. So happy to work in with you, Andrew, to really highlight your story and let people know about it. And I guess the taking seriously issue, I might need to think about that a bit more carefully. If it sounds like people want some sort of validation of your work that they're not getting, you know, I guess that's a slightly different issue. But yeah, I'd be very keen to catch up with you.
Excellent, thank you. Michael Evans has a question here that is quite interesting. So beyond the supply and capability side, how do you increase the demand side for AI skills, technologies and offerings?
Well, is there a lack of demand at the moment? You know, we know that, what is it? There are 8 times as many AI roles in Queensland advertised as there are actually people to fill them. And, you know, I haven't done a complete survey of the landscape yet, but anecdotally, we know that our AI and robotics companies are having increased interest in their offerings, mainly thanks to COVID, because people realize that if they don't apply some of these technologies, they aren't going to be able to be competitive, and that if they can get them supplied from within Australia, that's a definite advantage. So I do think you are correct in that there are many companies who are struggling with understanding what it is that they could use these technologies for, and in some cases perhaps they don't need to use these technologies, but they would benefit from being able to be confident that they know how to assess these technologies and how they can be applied. And I think that's a real gap, but hopefully one that Queensland AI Hub can help fill. So I'm not sure I've answered your question exactly, Michael, but no, that's an interesting question, and I'd be keen to talk more with you about that too.
Yeah, I think that, and again, I just keep reiterating, you know, the point of today is an introduction, learn a little bit about where you've come from, and to really encourage people to make contact with us. Jump on our social medias, jump on our website, you know, send us questions and introduce yourself. So that would be fantastic. And look, there is a question here from Daniel about your short-term plans. Now, again, I'll probably preface this a little bit, Daniel, just to say that with 2 or 3 days in the job, there's not been a lot of long-term planning or even really short-term planning just happen in the first few days. But we do have obviously programs and events and things that are coming up, and one of the things that we are looking to do in the very near future is to have another one of these sessions with Sue to keep communicating to the community, you know, what it is we're doing and where we're moving. So I will hand over to you, Sue, if you've got some brief ideas on some of the things you'd like to be achieving in the next little while.
Well,
Maybe
Daniel,
you could talk to that a bit.
Yeah, sure. No, thanks, Daniel. I mean, I think for me, it's a bit of an education process. I don't know the entire AI community. I mean, it's also a discovery process. What I'm hoping is that we're going to be unearthing stories like Andrew Robinson's of fantastic technology that is being created here in Queensland, or fantastic applications of AI technology that is having significant benefit. And I'm particularly interested in ways that it might be having benefit in, you know, ways that people might not expect. So, for example, the application of robotics in environmental remediation is something that people don't often think of as a benefit of the application of artificial intelligence technologies. So obviously a short-term personal goal is to become better educated about what's actually happening here in Queensland, but that links in with another longer-term goal. We are already actually working with both Queensland government and the federal government on some preliminary AI and robotics capability mapping. And so as part of our community, you might find soon that we will be helping to promote a survey that will be coming out from the Queensland government to try and define in a very overview way what some of Australia's robotics and capability is, but I think that we need to do much more detailed mapping. So that's going to be a key priority, because unless we can do that and be clearly articulate what the benefits of artificial intelligence are to the Queensland economy, then, you know, there's it's very difficult to convince people why they should invest, not just government, but also why foreign direct investment would look at coming into a place like Queensland. And, you know, also, you know, even in my first couple of days, I've been fielding inquiries from companies from overseas who are looking to set up here in Australia. I think, you know, we're in interesting times, being located in the Asia Pacific, where we're, you know, at the gateway of a very young, increasingly middle-class population in our region who will be technically savvy compared to many other parts of the world, I think really provides Australia with a great opportunity, and we really want Queensland to be well positioned to take advantage of that opportunity. So figuring out what the capability is in Queensland and then what we can do with it, figuring out how, you know, I mentioned a particular issue around how SMEs can engage with emerging technologies. That's also a key area that I'll be investigating over the next couple of months, as well as doing what has already been started with the Queensland AI Hub, holding events, building community, and promoting a lot of the great talent and technologies that we're already producing. Rowan, you're on mute.
Oh, there we go. Thank you. We are just about out of time, and I think given that we're all getting more than enough Zoom time in our lives at the moment, perhaps we could just finish it. Obviously, the state of Queensland is a big place. You know, from Gold Coast to Cairns is further than from Gold Coast to Melbourne. So I think understanding that while we have this desire to try and service and help as many people as we can, it's really reliant on the community coming to us as well and helping. So like the things with the survey, making sure that, you know, those things happen and communicate and engage with us from a point of view of us understanding where they are. You know, can you maybe just few words to finish with and discuss the fact that we are, while we're based here in Southeast Queensland, and you did touch on it, we are here for the broader Queensland community across the whole, and addressing those diversity issues with gender and, you know, engaging Indigenous populations and the challenges that face out in regional areas.
Yeah, so I mean, we're already partnering with different groups that help with delivering artificial intelligence education, and one of the key priorities of those education programs will be how we can reach communities that otherwise may not be able to access that sort of training, and to do that in a culturally sensitive and appropriate way. So that is a key priority, because we can't expect for everybody to come along on this journey if we are not inclusive. Excellent.
All right, well, thank you again for your time today, and thank you to everyone who's attended. We will follow up with the, you know, questions and contacts that have been made there. So, you know, thank you for those inquiries. And as I said, we need to hear what you have to say. So be active in communicating with us. We are very, very excited to have Sue as our leader. And for anyone that's ever done any work with her, she is a genuine leader and very, very caring, I guess, is the word for all the people that's under her care. And I think you'll find that as you get involved with the hub, that will also come across in her care for Queensland and what we got going ahead. So thank you, Sue. We really do look forward to seeing where you drive this amazing initiative from the Queensland government, and we hope to see everyone at our upcoming events. So keep on board. Sonia's listed some our social medias in the chat, so copy them down. And thank you again, Sue, and we look forward to seeing everyone at our next event.
Yeah, thank you everyone for attending.
All right, have a good night, and we'll see you next time. Thank you.